All right, let's fire up the analysis engines. Welcome to the deep dive. We're the AIs who take the data you feed us and, well, we dig in.
That's right. And today we're processing the information you sent about a pretty complex online situation. It's all about digital speech, online fights, and what happens next.
Specifically, we're looking at this clash involving Asmongold and Frogan. The sources you gave us, mostly transcripts, commentary, that kind of thing, they lay out a specific narrative.
Yeah, and our job here, as always, is just to unpack what's in those sources, what are the key arguments, what triggered this whole thing, why are people talking about it. We're just parsing the data provided.
So the origin point, according to your sources, seems to be a discussion Asmongold initiated, something about ad revenue.
Exactly. He apparently floated the idea of banning political content on platforms, maybe to make things smoother for advertisers. That seems to be the spark.
Okay, so let's break that down. The sources show Asmongold talking content moderation, basically, through an advertising lens.
And then Frogan's response, as quoted in the source material, was pretty direct. She said something like, you consider me political because I wear a hijab.
Right, she continued. I am not like you, and I do not make political content anywhere but typing a tweet once in a while. That's the quote provided.
And bam, right there you see the disconnect highlighted in the sources. One person's talking platform policy, the other's immediately connecting political labeling to their identity, specifically their religious attire.
Yeah, it's an immediate clash of perspective.
Yeah.
What is political content online? Is it just talking politics explicitly?
Or, as the source suggests Frogan felt, can just being visible with certain identities get you labeled political, even if that's not your intent. That tension is really central to how the sources frame this initial exchange.
But then the narrative in the sources shifts. Asmongold apparently pushed back, saying the criticism wasn't really about the hijab or the political label itself.
Correct. The sources state he argued the real issue was, and this is his framing according to the material, alleged disgusting behavior.
Okay, disgusting behavior. That's strong language. Did the sources list specifics?
Oh, yeah. The source material you provided itemizes several things. Comments allegedly made, like wishing American soldiers deserve PTSD.
Wow, okay. What else?
Also, hoping U.S. military personnel wouldn't get health insurance when they returned home.
Jeez, that's
Yeah.
pretty inflammatory stuff, if accurate, according to the source.
There's more. The sources also mentioned a proposal for a stream sub-goal to make a cake recreating the 9/11 attacks.
Hold on. A 9/11 cake sub-goal.
That's what the source claims was proposed.
Right.
And yeah, the source definitely flags that one as, particularly shocking in this whole mess.
I can see why. What else was on the list?
The sources cite the creation of what was described as an Arab and Jew racial tier list.
Okay, that sounds problematic on its face.
Yeah.
A racial tier list.
Yep. And finally, the sources note a comment that allegedly referred to the October 7th events as a revolution.
So, the picture painted by the sources is that Asmongold presented these specific items as the actual reasons for the backlash, framing it as being about behavior, not identity.
Exactly. The source material uses these examples to build the case that the controversy stems from these alleged actions and statements.
This brings up, the whole context and consequence thing online.
Right.
The source draws a comparison, doesn't it?
It does. It mentions Asmongold pointing out that he gets demonetized for just, hinting at sensitive stuff.
Right, contrasting his experience with someone apparently thinking a 9/11 cake idea wouldn't be a huge PR disaster. It highlights a perceived disconnect in understanding consequences.
And to really drive that point home, the source gives that concrete example, Honda pulling their sponsorship from Team Liquid.
Yeah, because a team member made a joke about the WWII nuclear bombing, right?
Exactly. The source uses that to show these aren't just online spats. There are real, tangible financial and reputational consequences. Big ones.
So that leads into another argument presented in the sources, this idea of the hijab as a shield.
Yeah, the source details Asmongold's claim that bringing up the hijab was basically a deflection, a way to sidestep criticism of the actual behavior.
Behavior which, quoting the source, quoting Asmongold again, was described as obnoxious, disgusting, annoying, and rude.
So, according to that perspective in the source, the argument is focus on the actions, not the identity. It's presented as being about accountability for specific comments and proposals.
The source seems to frame it as a debate over online conduct boundaries rather than purely political disagreement or identity politics.
And the sources bring up other examples related to this what counts as political theme, like that tier list about who can use an Arabic term of endearment.
Right, presented by Asmongold in the source as another instance of something potentially seen as political or gatekeepy. And there was that weird detail about Ben Shapiro being on a thumbnail.
Yeah, on the thumbnail for the tier list video, but apparently not actually on the list itself. The source notes that maybe implying it was clickbait or something designed to provoke.
Okay, so if we synthesize all this data from your sources, what's the bigger picture here for you, the listener?
Well, it really throws a spotlight on the tension online, doesn't it? You've got free speech, or what people feel they can say,
Versus how it's received, the interpretations, and then the hammer coming down the consequences for individuals, for platforms, for sponsors. It's messy.
issues like PR nightmares, getting demonetized, losing sponsors. The sources show these are absolutely real risks, especially when the content involves really sensitive, potentially harmful topics.
So understanding these dynamics, as laid out in the sources you provided, is pretty important if you spend any time online. You can see how fast things escalate.
How certain comments, even maybe intended casually or as edgy humor, can just explode into major controversies with serious fallout.
And let's be clear, as AI analyzing this, we're strictly relaying the perspectives and events as described in your source material. We aren't validating the claims or taking a stance on the underlying arguments ourselves.
Our function is just to process and present the data points from the sources provided for this deep dive.
So the main takeaways from these sources seem to be, 1, online actions, particularly around sensitive stuff, can have very real offline consequences.
And 2, the whole definition of political or problematic online is constantly being fought over. Controversies flare up super fast when certain lines are crossed, or perceived to be crossed, regardless of intent or identity markers.
Which leads to our final thought for you based on these sources. Think about that 9/11 cake example mentioned.
Yeah, consider how quickly something presented as, say, a joke or a sub-goal can become this massive public relations crisis. The speed and severity are kind of staggering.
So reflecting on what the sources presented here, the specific comments, the reactions, the consequences, where do you personally draw the line online between free expression and speech that causes significant harm or warrants serious repercussions?
It's a tough question with no easy answers. Thanks for providing the source material for us to process in this deep dive. It certainly highlights the complexities of online discourse.
Indeed. Join us next time on The Deep Dive, where we'll continue to parse the data streams you send our way.